Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Megan Smith from the Accounting Services Division of the Auditor General's Office. This webinar is the fourth and last in a series of webinars on information technology controls our office is presenting for school districts. The slides for the webinar are posted on our website at www.azauditor.gov. You can find them under Reports and Publications, School Districts Webinars. We've also provided a link to our website in the reminder email you received for today's webinar. If you're having any trouble hearing the presenters through your computer, you can call into the webinar at the phone number provided in the reminder email. We've reserved 90 minutes for this webinar to allow time for your questions, but as we don't know exactly how many questions you will have, we may end up a bit early. Speaking of questions, you can use the window on the right of your screen to type in your question at any time. If we don't stop to cover the questions as we cover the materials, we will get to the questions at the end of this session. If your question is fairly district specific, or if we need to discuss this issue with you more to ensure we adequately address your questions, we will contact you after the webinar. If we do go the full time today and you need to leave early, don't worry about missing any important information, as this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our website along with a timed outline to help you access any information you may miss or allow you to simply refer back to the information covered today. That recording can be used to share this information with others at your district that were not able to attend the webinar today. Presenting with me today, I have Jenny Snedeker from our Division of School Audits and Katie Morris from our IT Audit Division. Jenny is an experienced lead auditor in our school district performance audits, and she specializes in the IT control evaluation that our office does as part of those audits. Katie has a background in IT and assisted with the IT audit portion on the performance and financial audits for state agencies, counties, and school districts. In today's webinar, we will focus on contingency planning. All of the topics for this series of IT webinars are related to the areas that our office has identified either through the compliance questionnaire completed by your financial auditors or through our own performance audits as areas that districts can make improvements to better secure their network and accounting and student information systems. Today we will be discussing what a contingency plan is and why it's important, steps to follow in creating a contingency plan, the importance and details of testing a contingency plan and training those involved in the emergency response process, and best practices, tools, and resources that will help districts implement the items we are discussing today. Now I'll turn things over to Jenny and Katie to start today.
Thank you, Megan. If you attended or viewed one of our previous IT webinars, you may have been expecting our fourth IT webinar to be titled Disaster Recovery Planning. Previously, our office has looked at and referred to emergency management efforts as disaster recovery. However, the state has recently adopted security policies and standards outlined by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. To align with the state, our office has also adopted this framework and changed our terminology to contingency planning. This is more than just a change in name, though. Contingency planning represents a broad scope of activities designed to sustain and recover critical information system services following an emergency event, while disaster recovery includes only the relocation of the data center to a secondary site after a disaster. Contingency planning is part of a much broader security and emergency management effort that includes organizational and business process continuity, disaster recovery planning, and incident management. While some districts may refer to their plan as a disaster recovery plan, it may contain many of the same elements of a contingency plan. Contingency planning ensures that the proper procedures and technical measures are utilized following a disruption to enable district operations to continue and at the same time enable systems to be recovered as quickly and effectively as possible. These measures may include restoring information systems using alternate equipment, performing some or all of the affected business processes using alternate or manual processing means, recovering information systems operations at an alternate location, and implementing appropriate controls based on the information system's security impact. So what is a disruption? A disruption can be anything from malware, theft, lightning, fire, a power outage, or a disk drive failure. A threat or disruption is any circumstance or event with the potential to negatively impact district operations, assets, or individuals through an information system via unauthorized access, destruction, disclosure, or modification of information, or denial of service. Sources of disruptions or threats can be categorized into specific types. An adversarial threat may be any individuals, whether they be an outsider or trusted employee, a group or organization that wish to cause harm to the district through a data breach or exploit. An accidental threat or disruption could be caused by a user or administrator performing an action unintentionally during their regular day, such as accidentally installing malware. Structural threats or disruptions include failures of IT equipment, environmental controls such as temperature and humidity controls or power supply, or software, including operating systems, networking, or applications. Environmental threats include natural or man-made disasters like a fire, flood, lightning, bombing, infrastructure failure, or outage, which could include phone lines, emergency response systems, and electrical power. Creating and implementing a contingency plan is not just the job of the IT department. District management plays a major role as well. Since part of a contingency planning is really built around business processes and includes falling back to manual processes, management would know best how those processes work. Risk assessments should be performed at the district office level with input from the information technology department. District management and IT staff should then work together to conduct a business impact analysis. Develop the contingency plans for each critical system, such as the network or the accounting or student information system. Train the appropriate staff on each plan and periodically test those plans. Contingency planning processes for IT-only systems, such as email systems and servers, will be the sole responsibility of the IT department. The contingency plans will take into account the decisions made by management and IT, as well as the expected recovery timeline. We will discuss the specific responsibilities listed here throughout this presentation. In order to determine what disruptions or threats a district is at risk of experiencing, a strong risk management process should be in place at any organization and to take into account all types of risk, including information security risks. Information security risks are those risks that arise from the loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability of data or information systems and could result in negative impacts to district's operations, assets, and individuals. As part of risk management, a risk assessment is conducted to determine risks that are common to the core mission and business functions, processes, or information systems. A risk assessment will identify potential threats and disruptions, determine the likelihood of occurrence, and determine the impact the threat could have on a district. Here is an example of a risk assessment. The disruption or threat would be the lightning at the data center, which is an environmental threat type. The range of effects is an assessment scale of how large of an effect the disruption could have on the district. Lightning at the data center has the potential to cause extensive damage to many network resources, which would make the range of effects high. The likelihood of occurrence is how likely this disruption or event could occur. In this example, lightning is somewhat likely to occur, which makes it a moderate likelihood of occurrence. The vulnerabilities column is where you would identify vulnerabilities which could be exploited by the threat or disruption, which increases the likelihood of adverse impacts. Here we have that a contingency plan does not exist for all systems. This is a vulnerability because if the data center gets struck by lightning, the systems without contingency plans in place will be much more difficult to bring back up. The severity column assesses the severity of the vulnerability. In this instance, the vulnerability is of high concern based on the severity of the impact that could result. The likelihood that the disruption will result in adverse impact column takes into consideration the severity of the vulnerabilities. Here, the likelihood of adverse impact is high. Next, the overall likelihood is assessed, which takes into account the likelihood of occurrence and the likelihood of adverse impacts. The overall likelihood is moderate here. The level of impact is the adverse impact of the disruption or threat. Examples of adverse impacts would be harm to operations or the inability to perform mission or business functions. A moderate value means the disruption could have a serious adverse effect on operations. Finally, the risk is determined. Risk takes into account the overall likelihood and the level of impact. Because both are moderate, the risk is moderate. Moderate risk means that a threat event could have a serious adverse effect on the district. Although not technically part of a contingency plan, risk management is an integral tool in creating an effective plan. For more information, refer to NIST Special Publication 830R1 and NIST Special Publication 839. Both contain detailed information regarding risk management and risk assessment. A well-laid-out contingency plan serves more than just meeting the requirements of the Uniform System of Financial Records, which we refer to as the USFR. A contingency plan's main functions are to reduce the risk and minimize the effect of a system and service unavailability. If unavailability does occur, the plan allows a district's business functions to continue operating in the event of a system disruption. Having a contingency plan in place before a disruption occurs can prevent worsening the situation if you are unprepared. Just as a side note, out of the 103 performance audits that our office has prepared or done by our Division of School Audits, we've had 37 districts that did not have a disaster recovery or contingency plan in place, and 14 did not have a contingency plan or disaster agreement with their third-party vendor providing IT services. That is just about half of the districts that we've audited that did not have the adequate procedures in place to allow them to effectively handle emergency situations. Rather than having a one-size-fits-all plan, contingency planning activities should be tailor-based on the size of the district. Smaller districts may not be able to implement every aspect of contingency planning, while larger districts may have a very rigid process in place. Contingency planning is also unique to each system, whether it be the accounting system, student information system, or network. It provides preventative measures, recovery strategies, and technical considerations appropriate to each system's information confidentiality, integrity, and the system's business impact. Because each plan addresses a single information system, a district will most likely have multiple contingency plans in place. Also, because all systems vary in size and criticality, the amount of detail included within each plan at an individual district may vary as well. While no one plan will be identical, there are 7 steps outlined in the NIST Special Publication 834 that should be followed to ensure that the contingency planning process results in a comprehensive plan that addresses each district's and each system's needs. Those steps are: develop the contingency planning policy, conduct the business impacts analysis, identify preventative controls, create contingency strategies, develop an information system contingency plan, ensure plan testing, training, and exercises, and finally, ensure plan maintenance. We will go over each step throughout the remainder of the presentation. The first step is developing a contingency planning policy. The contingency planning policy will aid in the development of each plan by defining the district's overall objectives for contingency planning and establishing what each plan should contain. This can serve as a type of template for the district to utilize when creating a plan for each system. That policy should include items such as the roles and responsibilities of those involved in creating and carrying out the contingency plan, the scope of each plan and how it applies to district functions or business processes, resource requirements including an inventory of all affected components such as systems, hardware, and software, training requirements for all staff involved, exercise and testing schedules for the plan maintenance schedule to determine how frequently the plan should be reviewed and updated, and the minimum frequency of backups and storage of backup media. This contingency planning policy could be included at the beginning of each plan or as its own separate document. The next step is to perform a business impact analysis. The purpose of a business impact analysis is to identify the different operating systems the district uses, how they contribute to the district's mission and business processes, and what kind of impact a system loss would have on a district's operations. Creating the BIA involves planning at a district-wide level and should involve both business officials and IT staff. The analysis should include determining the business processes supported by each system and the criticality of recovery, identifying resource requirements, and identifying the recovery priorities for system resources. We will go over each of these steps on the next few slides. In the first step of completing a business impact analysis, business office officials should work with IT employees to determine how each operating system supports the district's day-to-day operations, the impact of a system disruption or outage to those processes, and the acceptable downtime. The downtime should reflect the maximum time the district can tolerate an outage while still maintaining the mission. The downtime can be identified in several ways. The recovery point objective, which determines the maximum acceptable amount of data loss the district can tolerate, measured in time. For example, the maximum tolerable data loss for the accounting system could be 15 minutes. This is based on backup schedules and data needs. The recovery time objective determines the maximum amount of time a system resource can be unavailable before there is a negative impact on other system resources, business processes, and maximum tolerable downtime, which we will cover in a minute. The recovery time of the work recovery time defines the duration of time needed to recover lost data based on recovery point objective and to enter data resulting from work backlogs, manual data generated during system outage. And the maximum tolerable downtime represents the total amount of time that a business process can be disrupted without causing unacceptable consequences. This value should be defined by the system administrator and includes both recovery time objective and work recovery time. Let's go over an example of calculating the estimated downtime. If the accounting system were to go down at the data center, what would be the acceptable amount of data loss for the system? Because the accounting system is a critical system, the district determines that 12 hours is the maximum tolerable data loss. That is the recovery point objective. This means that the district should have a usable state of the accounting system to account for that 12 hours. Therefore, incremental backups may have to be performed more often. Now, what is the tolerable amount of time for the system to be recovered? This would include time for restoring data from backups and recovering the system. This does not mean the system is ready for production yet. How long can the system be down before it affects district operations? Questions you should consider are, how long can the district go without their accounting system? Or if the human resources system is separate, how long can they go without it? And additionally, how does the district utilize their student information system? How long can the district go without accessing it? Is it tied to the student transportation at all? If so, will it affect the bus routes? For this example, let's say the district determined the maximum tolerable amount of time for the system to be recovered is 4 hours. This is the recovery time objective. Once the system is recovered, what is the maximum tolerable amount of time needed to verify the system and data integrity? To resume operations, the system needs to be fully recovered and the integrity of the system and data verified. This includes checking the databases and logs and ensuring all services are up and running. Let's say the district determined the maximum tolerable amount of time needed to verify system and data integrity would be 2 hours. This is the work recovery time. The sum of the recovery time objective and the work recovery time is the maximum tolerable downtime, which defines the total amount of time that a business process can be disrupted without causing unacceptable consequences. This value should be defined by the management team or the IT manager. The second step in creating a business impact analysis is identifying resource requirements. Realistic recovery efforts require a thorough evaluation of the resources required to resume mission or business processes and related interdependencies as quickly as possible. Examples of resources that should be identified include facilities such as where the backup data center is located, personnel responsible for the business processes, equipment such as required system resources for the student information system or accounting system, software including the operating system version, data files, system components, and vital records. The final step in a business impact analysis is identifying recovery priorities for system resources. Based upon the results from the previous activities, system resources can be linked more clearly to critical mission or business processes and functions. IT staff can work with business office staff to determine the order in which system outages should be addressed based on how essential each system is to continuing the normal operations of the district. This is essentially creating a hierarchy of system recovery priorities. For example, a district may decide that its network is a top priority that must be recovered in the event of an outage, followed by its accounting system and student information system. The next step in the contingency planning process is to try to mitigate or eliminate any possible outage impacts identified in the previous step through preventative measures. Preventative measures are always preferable when possible to avoid the need to recover a system after a disruption. Some common preventative controls are environmental and backup controls. Having effective environmental controls in place can protect systems and reduce the information system risk and likelihood of contingency activation. There are several controls that can be put in place to protect district systems and assets, such as protecting power equipment and cabling for the information system from damage and destruction by employing internal and external protections as necessary. This would include generators and power cables. Provide a short-term uninterruptible power supply to facilitate a proper shutdown of the system in the event of power loss. And for data centers, server rooms, and mainframe computers, districts can provide the capability of shutting off power to the information system or individual system components and place the emergency shutoff switches or devices in specific locations. Employ and maintain automatic emergency lighting for the information system that activates in the event of a power outage or disruption, which includes emergency exits and evacuation routes. Employ fire suppression and detection devices or systems that are supported by an independent energy source, such as sprinkler systems, handheld fire extinguishers, fixed fire hoses, and smoke detectors. Maintain temperature and humidity control levels within the center and monitor temperature and humidity levels. And protect the systems from damage resulting from water leakage by providing master shutoff or isolation valves that are accessible, working properly, and known to key personnel. These controls are part of the physical and environmental control family within NIST Special Publication 800-53R4. Additional controls are included in the PE family. As we move through the contingency planning process in the next step, contingency strategies are created to mitigate the risks identified in the business impact analysis. These cover the full range of backup and recovery strategies. And now, Katie will discuss creating contingency strategies.
Thank you, Jenny. You're welcome. Backup and recovery strategies help restore system operations quickly and effectively following a disruption. These strategies should take into account the allowable downtimes identified in the business impact analysis. System data should be backed up regularly with policies specifying the minimum frequency and scope of backups based on the data criticality. For instance, if the accounting system contains critical information, then incremental backups should be performed daily and full backups performed weekly. Data backup policies should exist which designate the location of stored data, file naming conventions, media rotation frequency, and the method for transporting data off-site. Data can be backed up on magnetic disks, tape, or optical disks, such as CDs. The backup method chosen should be based on the business impact analysis requirements. It is good practice to store backed up data off-site. Some districts will store district office and middle school backups at the elementary school server room and vice versa. An alternate processing site is another good practice to consider. This could be at a district site other than the main data center or at a separate location which is able to support system operations in the event the data center is unavailable. There are three main types of alternate sites: cold sites, warm sites, or hot sites. Cold sites are facilities with space and infrastructure to support system recovery activities. Infrastructure includes electric power, telecommunications, and the environmental controls discussed previously. Warm sites contain some or all of the system hardware, software, telecommunications, and power sources needed. And hot sites are designed to be the correct size to support system requirements and configured with all necessary system hardware, infrastructure, and support personnel. Another site type that may be considered are mirrored sites, which are fully redundant locations with automated real-time information mirroring. Mirrored sites are identical to the primary site in all technical respects. The district should perform a cost-benefit analysis to determine the best processing site for them. Vendor agreements are another important contingency strategy. If the student information system is damaged or destroyed, or the primary site is unavailable, hardware and software needs to be activated or procured quickly and delivered to the alternate location. Vendor agreements should specify emergency maintenance service and detail how quickly the vendor should respond after being notified. If the system is hosted off-site by a third-party vendor, this does not eliminate the district's need for a contingency plan. Districts who utilize third-party vendors, including the county if a district system is hosted through them, will have to detail the responsibilities of each party throughout the plan and also within the contract terms and conditions or service level agreement. The district contingency plan for that system would include the contact information for the vendor and a copy of the contract or service level agreement as part of the appendices. Contracts for the systems hosted off-site by a third party should also require the vendor to provide their contingency plan to the district before system implementation and again whenever significant updates are made that affect the district. We have finally arrived at the step in the contingency planning process where a district can begin to create its contingency plan. As stated previously, contingency plans are not one-size-fits-all. Each plan needs to be tailored based on the district size and the system criticality, as determined in the business impact analysis. Plans should be clear, concise, and easy to implement in an emergency. It should consider the possibility that personnel who may be unfamiliar with the plan or the systems are called on to perform recovery operations. After all, we are talking about emergency situations. Taking that into account, the main objectives that each contingency plan should include are supporting information, activation and notification, recovery, reconstitution, and appendices. Each of these areas will be discussed in detail in the coming slides. Supporting information provides background information that makes the contingency plan easier to understand, implement, and maintain. The introduction includes information to direct personnel to the type and location of information contained in the plan. Generally, this area includes the following subsections: the background, which establishes the reason for developing the contingency plan and defines the plan objectives; the scope, which identifies the recovery time objectives, as well as alternate site and data storage capabilities, and a list of assumptions that were used in developing the contingency plan, as well as a list of situations that are not applicable. The concept of operations section provides a high-level overview of the system description, which should include the system architecture, locations, and any other important technical considerations. System diagrams, including security devices and input-output diagrams, are useful here. An overview of the 3 phases of the contingency plan, which is activation and notification, recovery, and reconstitution, and the roles and responsibilities, which details the duties of key personnel during a disruption. Activation and notification procedures define the initial actions that should be taken once a system disruption or outage has been detected or appears to be imminent. This includes criteria to activate the plan, procedures to notify recovery personnel, and conducting an outage assessment. The contingency plan should be activated if one or more of the activation criteria for that system are met. Criteria for activation are unique to each district and should be based on the extent of any damage to the system, whether it be physical, operational, or cost, the criticality of the system to the district's mission, and the expected duration of the outage, lasting no longer than recovery time objectives. Prompt notification is important for reducing the effects of a disruption on the system, possibly providing enough time for IT personnel to shut down the system properly and avoid a hard crash. An outage or disruption may occur with or without prior notice. Notification procedures should be documented in the plan for both types of situations. The procedures should describe the methods used to notify recovery personnel during business and non-business hours. Notifications can be via telephone, email, or messaging. A call tree can be utilized to notify specific individuals who in turn are responsible for notifying other recovery personnel. A call tree should include primary and alternate contact methods and should discuss procedures to be followed if an individual cannot be contacted. Notifications should also be sent to the point of contact for external organizations or third-party service providers that may be affected if they are unaware of the situation. The contingency plan should also describe the type of information that is to be relayed to those being notified. To determine how the contingency plan will be implemented following a system disruption or outage, an assessment needs to be completed to determine the nature and extent of the disruption. An outage assessment should be completed as quickly as possible, and the person responsible for conducting the outage assessment should be one of the first contacted. Procedures may be unique for each individual system, but should address the cause of the outage or disruption, the potential for additional disruptions or damage, the status of the physical infrastructure, an inventory and functional status of system equipment, the type of damage to the system equipment or data, any items that need to be replaced, and the estimated time to restore normal services. Once system impact has been determined, the appropriate individuals should be notified of updated information and the response to the situation. Recovery operations begin after the contingency plan has been activated. Outage assessments have been completed and personnel have been notified. This phase focuses on implementing recovery strategies to restore system capabilities, repair damage, and resume operations at the original or new alternate location. After this phase is complete, the information system will be functional and capable of performing the functions identified in the plan. It is possible that only system resources identified as high priority in the business impact analysis will be recovered in this stage. The recovery phase of the contingency plan should include a ranking of recovery activities, detailed recovery procedures, and recovery escalation and notification procedures. Recovery activities should be laid out in sequential order so that system components are restored in a logical manner. The order of recovery activities should also reflect the system's maximum tolerable downtime to avoid significant impacts to related systems. For complex systems, recovery procedures should reflect system priorities identified in the business impact analysis. The systems most critical to the district's business operations should be addressed first. Procedures should include escalation steps and instructions to coordinate with other personnel where relevant when situations occur, such as an action not being completed within the expected time frame, a key step not being completed, any items that must be procured, and whether other system-specific concerns exist. If the system is to be recovered at an alternate site, materials will need to be transferred or purchased. These items may include shipment of data backup media from off-site storage, hardware, copies of the recovery plan, and software programs. These procedures should detail the appropriate personnel in charge of coordinating the shipment of data. References to appendices such as equipment lists or vendor contact information should be made where necessary. Recovery procedures provide details to restore the information system or components to a known state. Specific procedures will vary from system to system. However, they will usually address the following: obtaining authorization to access damaged facilities and/or geographic area, notifying internal and external business partners associated with the system, obtaining necessary office supplies and workspace, obtaining and installing necessary hardware components, obtaining and loading backup media, restoring critical operating system and application software, restoring system data to a known state, testing system functionality, including security controls, connecting systems to network or other external systems, and operating alternate equipment successfully. Recovery procedures should be a step-by-step guide that identifies personnel responsible for each action. No step should be assumed or omitted. Recovery escalation and notification provides appropriate procedures for escalation notices during recovery efforts. Notifications during recovery would include problem escalation to leadership, status awareness to system owners and users, and notices for additional resources. Procedures should be included to establish a clear set of events, actions, and results, and should be documented for individuals as appropriate. Reconstitution is the final phase of contingency plan implementation and defines the actions taken to test and validate system capability and functionality. During reconstitution, recovery activities are completed and normal system operations are resumed. This phase consists of two major activities: validating successful recovery and deactivation of the plan. Validation of recovery typically includes concurrent processing, which is the process of running a system at two separate locations simultaneously until there is a level of assurance that the recovered system is operating correctly and securely. Validation data testing tests and validates recovered data to ensure the data files or databases have been completely recovered and are current to the last available backup. Validation functionality testing verifies that all system functionality has been tested and the system is ready to return to normal operations. Upon completion of validation testing, personnel will make the declaration that reconstitution is completed and the system is operating normally. Deactivation of the plan returns the system to normal operations and finalizes reconstitution activities to prepare the system against another outage or disruption. These activities include notifying users upon return to normal operations. Notification will usually be given by the contingency plan coordinator using predefined notification procedures. Cleanup involves cleaning up workspace or breaking down temporary recovery locations, restocking supplies, returning manuals or other documentation, and preparing the system for another contingency event. If off-site data storage is used, documented procedures for returning the backups or installation media to its off-site data storage location should be utilized. Following reconstitution, the system should be fully backed up and a new copy of the current operational system stored for future recovery efforts. All recovery and reconstitution events should be well documented, including actions taken and problems encountered during the effort. A lessons learned session should be documented and included for updating the contingency plan. Once all activities have been completed and documentation updated, the contingency plan can be formally deactivated. A declaration announcement should be sent to all business and technical contacts. Contingency plan appendices provide key details not contained in the main portion of the plan, but are referred to in multiple sections. Common appendices include contact information for contingency planning personnel, vendor contact information, including off-site storage and alternate site point of contact, the business impact analysis, detailed recovery procedures and checklists, detailed validation testing procedures and checklists, equipment and system requirement lists of the hardware, software, firmware, and other resources required to support system operations. Details should be provided for each entry, including model or version number, specifications, and quantity. Alternate mission or business processing procedures that may occur while recovery efforts are being done to the system, contingency plan testing and maintenance procedures, system interconnections, and vendor service level agreements with other organizations, and other vital records. After a contingency plan is created, employees should be trained on their roles in the contingency plan, and the plan should be tested to identify deficiencies and ensure reliability. Training should be constrained to only the personnel required for each system contingency plan. The training should focus on familiarizing them with their contingency roles and teaching the skills necessary to accomplish those roles. This helps to ensure that staff are prepared to participate in tests and exercises, as well as actual outage events. Training should be provided at least annually. Personnel that are new to a contingency role should receive training shortly thereafter. Personnel should be trained to the extent that they are able to execute their respective recovery roles and responsibilities without aid of the actual contingency plan. Recovery personnel should be trained on the following plan elements: the purpose of the plan, reporting procedures, security requirements, and individual responsibilities during activation and notification, recovery, and reconstitution phases. It is also important that all employees at the business office at least know where the plan is located, both physically and digitally, and the basic first steps to notify the appropriate personnel that an incident has occurred in the event that IT staff or those involved in the contingency planning process are unavailable at the time a disaster occurs. This is especially important in smaller districts where fewer employees may be involved in the contingency plan procedures. Testing should be conducted in as close to an operating environment as possible. All personnel involved in the contingency planning process should also be involved in testing the plan. Tests should be performed at least annually, or in the event of a change in circumstance, such as a change in systems or a change in personnel. Each system component should be tested to confirm the accuracy of recovery procedures. The following areas should be addressed in a contingency plan test as applicable: notification procedures, system recovery on an alternate platform from backup media, internal and external connectivity, system performance using alternate equipment, restoration of normal operations, and other planned testing where coordination is identified. There are different types of exercises that can be utilized for testing: tabletop exercises and functional exercises. Tabletop exercises are discussion-based, where personnel meet in a classroom setting or breakout groups to discuss their roles during an emergency and their responses to a particular emergency situation. A facilitator presents a scenario and asks the participants questions related to the scenario, which gets a discussion going among the participants. A tabletop exercise does not involve deploying equipment or other resources. Tabletop exercises should be thoroughly documented to include test notes, the scenario, guidelines, attendance sheets, start and end times, a lessons learned, and any other items utilized during the exercise. While tabletop exercises are helpful in identifying flaws in the plan, this type of exercise does not replace a functional test, as it does not simulate the environment. Functional exercises allow personnel to validate their readiness for emergencies by performing their duties in a simulated environment. These are designed to exercise the roles and responsibilities of personnel, procedures, and assets involved in one or more functional aspects of the plan. Functional exercises vary in complexity and scope from working with one specific area of the plan to a full-scale exercise that addresses all plan elements. These exercises allow staff to execute their roles and responsibilities as they would in an actual emergency situation. Functional tests help identify issues with the plan, including hardware compatibility and system setting issues. Functional exercises should also be documented and include a lessons learned. Any lessons learned should be incorporated into the contingency plan. Once a contingency plan has been implemented, it must be maintained in a ready state to remain effective. It is imperative that contingency plans are reviewed and updated regularly to ensure new information is documented and contingency measures are revised if required. A good practice is reviewing plans for accuracy and completeness annually and whenever significant changes occur to any element of the plan. Significant changes include personnel changes, contact information changes, hardware or software changes, and any deficiencies that may have been identified during a planned test or actual disruption. Changes to the plan should be communicated and distributed to all who require it for personnel and for storage. A record of changes should be integrated into the plan to recognize the most recent versions and what the revisions have been. Here are links to best practices, tools, and resources. NIST Special Publication 834 is the Contingency Planning Guide. It provides examples and explanations for performing a business impact analysis and creating a contingency plan. This special publication also has sample contingency plan templates for low, medium, and high impact systems. NIST Special Publication 853, Revision 4, provides details on the different security and privacy controls. The security control baselines help determine what controls should be in place for low, moderate, and high impact systems. It also includes references to different NIST special publications that may provide more details on the specific controls. NIST Special Publication 830, Revision 1, is a guide for conducting risk assessments and includes a step-by-step approach along with examples. NIST Special Publication 839 covers the entire risk management process, including risk assessments. This is a great resource for district officials and IT management alike. Our office website is also a great resource for information. There are several FAQs related to information technology. Also, the Uniform System of Financial Records Manual is another great resource. Both currently address disaster recovery, but will be modified to reflect the change to contingency planning. So that wraps up our presentation for today. Thank you again for attending the webinar today. Our contact information is here on the slide if you have any additional questions.